Don't fear the gear. Hi, my name is Jeff Sorensen. We're here at Glen Helen Regional Park, and today I'm going to introduce you to the gear that we use to go trout fishing at any of our regional lakes. There's two types of gear we're going to talk about. One is the gear that is used for all the other parts of the fishing, and the other part is the stuff that's considered tackle, which is the stuff that's actually connected to the fishing pole and is what is used to actually catch the fish. The first type of gear that is needed is something to store all your other gear in, and that's called a tackle box. Here we have an example. Here's a small, simple one. Here's a little bit larger one, probably more than you're going to need for any type of fishing here for the trout here at the regional parks. If you're going ocean fishing, sometimes you see people with big, huge tackle boxes that weigh like 100 pounds because they have so much lead and stuff. Or like I said, it can be nice and simple like this. It's all a matter of personal preference, and it depends on what type of fishing you're going to be doing. The next thing we're going to talk about is line clippers, which is basically just a standard fingernail clippers. They are available in commercial. This is just a commercial one. It's basically the same thing. It's probably just this one costs more. These are great pieces of gear to have because it clips the end nice and short. And other people will use scissors or pliers, and some people even bite the line. You never want to bite the fishing line because you end up chipping a tooth, and it's just a terrible habit to get into. The good thing about the clippers as opposed to a pliers is that you can just fold it up, put it in your pocket, and it's very convenient. You always have it if you need it. The next thing we're going to talk about is needle nose or long nose pliers. Very handy, serves a lot of purposes. This is a stainless steel one, which is nice to have because it doesn't rust when it gets wet. You may use them for taking hooks out of the fish, or crimping certain split shot sinkers, or fixing your reels, or many other things. Many people have little cases that they put these right in their belt, so they're nice and handy and convenient. Otherwise, you could just throw those in the tackle box also. As I said, the pliers is one way to remove the fish hook. The other, we have two examples here of hook removers. You just slide these, either one, you slide it down the line and into the mouth, and once it gets to the hook, you push it backwards a little bit to dislodge the hook, and then you just kind of slide it out, and it protects the hook, and it also makes it's a much more gentle way to get the hook out of the fish than using a pliers. The next piece of gear we're going to talk about is the landing net. When you catch a fish and you get it in close to the shore, you want to bring it out of the water with a landing net. Because when the fish is in the water, it weighs roughly the same as the water, so it doesn't feel heavy. But when it hits the air, it's going to feel heavy, and if it's a good sized fish and you're using light line, there's a chance it'll snap the line. So you want to keep the fish in the water, gently put the landing net underneath the fish, and scoop it out with the net. After you catch the fish, the next thing you're going to need is something to store the fish with. And in most cases, people use a stringer. We have two types of stringers available. One is a nylon stringer, and the other one is a metal or chain stringer. The nylon stringer is basically just a piece of nylon rope with a metal point at one end and a loop. And the way you use that is you put the metal loop through the gill and out the mouth of the fish, and then just put the metal point through the loop so that the first fish is basically lassoed so it can't get away. And then as you catch more fish, you could just string them on. You don't need to put those through the lasso. You just stick the metal point through the gills of the next fish. And then you tie the loop to something, you tie the metal point to something. You don't just stick it in the dirt because it's not secure, plus it ends up ruining the point. The second type of stringer is a metal or chain stringer, and Chrissy's going to show you how to use those. You basically have like some individual hooks that you open up, and then you slide the same thing. You slide that hook through the gill and out the mouth, and then close the hook around the fish, and that way you've got your fish all on one stringer. And the good thing about this one is it takes beautiful pictures because all your fish hang there nice and straight. And lastly, the important thing about the stringer is each person at our regional parks, lakes, needs a stringer because there's a bag limit, and that's how the wardens and the rangers can tell how many fish you've caught. So each person needs their own stringer. The next piece of gear we want to talk about, and this is just a really nice thing to have, is a pole holder. When you're fishing for trout, we use dough bait, so that basically it just sits there for a long time, and you want to be able to rest your arms. You don't want to hold the pole the whole time, at least most people don't. Either one of these, you just put them in the ground, and then the way this works is this one, the pole sticks straight out. This one, the pole goes sideways. This one's my preferred method. It's easier. This one's kind of like a little more advanced because you have to watch the pole a lot more, and it works real well. You can tell if you got a light bite with these real well, but other than that, it's a little harder to use. And the last gear that's important to have is you always want to have plenty of good luck. Now that we've covered all the gear, the next thing we want to talk about is the tackle that we actually use to catch the fish. The first thing we're going to talk about is the fishing line. There's two common types of line. One is either braid or the other is monofilament. Braid is a number of strands of fiber braided together. That's why it's called braid. This is Spectra braid. It's not nearly as common as monofilament, but it's a lot stronger and a lot thinner, and it doesn't stretch. So usually what they use this for is backing. The most common type of fishing line is monofilament, which is basically, mono means it's one long piece of plastic, or nylon actually, and like this. And the important thing about the monofilament is, as you notice, it comes in different colors, clear being probably the most common. And so it's different colors, which doesn't make a whole bunch of difference unless you're looking for clear. And the other thing with it is the weight, the pound test. And what that means is the pound test is how much this will hold before it will break. Now this spool is 60-pound test, and it's very stiff. It's basically like wire. This is 25 pounds, so it's a little bit more flimsy. And this is 4-pound, which is pretty soft, and which is normally what we use here for backing at least, and maybe a 2-pound leader. The point being, it comes in different weights, and you want to use as light as possible and still think that you can be comfortable in catching the fish. For example, this 60-pound test, this is like for ocean fishing. If you use something like this here, it is so stiff and unnatural looking to the fish that there's no way that you'd catch a trout using this. So the point is, you want to use as light as possible and still be comfortable catching a fish. Many people here, especially the experienced fishermen, they will be using 2-pound tests, and they can easily catch a 10-pound fish on the 2-pound test line. The next thing we're going to talk about is the hooks. Here we have a couple of examples. This is a fish hook, or an example of a fish hook. We'll go over the parts real quick. This is called the eye. This is the shank. This is the bend, and this is the point. And this is an example, but off the point, there's a part coming back that's called the barb. And that's the part that if you get a fish hook stuck in you, that's the part that really gets hard to remove. So you want to always be aware of where your fish hook is so that it doesn't catch you, or even if it catches cloth, it can be very hard to get out. So always watch where your hook is placed. This is a regular hook. This is called a treble hook because it's basically 3 hooks put together. Just 1, 2, 3. That's why it's treble. This is what we use for trout fishing here, because when we show you the baits, basically what we do is we use a dough rig and you put the bait around the treble hook, and that's the presentation you make. The other thing about the hooks is they have numbers, and generally the bigger the number is, the smaller the hook is. So this is a size 1 hook. It's pretty good sized. That's a regular hook in a size 1. Here we have a number 18 treble hook. So these are really small. 16 and 18 size treble hooks is what we use for trout fishing here. So again, the bigger the number, the smaller the hook. And you want to, again, use small hooks. Everything you want to do is you want to keep it small so that the fish don't notice it, and there's a better chance that they'll bite. And a lot of people even will use light line and small hooks because there's a chance that when they catch a fish, they might end up losing it because the gear is so light. but they'll get a lot more bites and catch a lot more fish using light gear. The next tackle we're going to talk about is sinkers or weights. Generally the fish are towards the bottom of the lake, so you have to make sure that your bait gets down deep enough for them. If you're especially if you're using dough bait, that floats. So you have to have some type of weight on there to bring the bait down to where the fish are. When we rig our poles here, we use an egg sinker, which is a small, looks like an egg, it's very hard to see, but it looks like a small egg, and it has a hole through it so that the line can slide down it. And that way when the fish bites, they don't feel that there's a weight there, and they can just pull the line without feeling the weight. And again, it's all about trying to make sure the fish don't know that there's something weird going on, so they don't feel it. Another one is very common is a split shot, which is basically just a little lead ball with a slice through it, and you just crimp that on the line with your needle nose, and that way you have a controlled depth as to how far the bait will be from the bottom. The next thing is a swivel. We have two types of swivels. One's a barrel swivel, which basically has a small loop on either end. The other is a snap swivel, which has a snap at one end. And the good thing about this is it's a little bit bigger, which is not good, but it's also easier to change your baits. And these will be shown in close-up so you can see them better. But this one is what we generally use because you can clip the bait on, you can clip and change it if you need to. The next thing we want to talk about is a bobber or a float. The proper name is a float, but most people call them a bobber. And everyone thinks that the main point of a bobber is you put it out there, and when it's sitting there and all of a sudden it starts going like this, that shows that you have a bite, which is true. That's one thing they do. The other thing they do is you can't always know for sure that the fish are right at the bottom. So what a float does, either one, they have a place for the line to go through. What they do is you can control how far you are from the bottom, because you clip your line through here, and then say you put it down 3 feet, you know that your weight is going to be down 3 feet. If it's 4 or 5 feet, whatever the case may be, this will keep you off the bottom. That's all the tackle we use, and when it's all put together, this is the rig we use here at the regional parks for catching the trout. You have the fishing pole with the line, and the line goes down to the swivel, and above the swivel you have the egg sinker, which is sliding on the line, and I like to put a bead between the egg sinker and the swivel so that the egg sinker doesn't get stuck on the line, and that way it makes sure it slides rather than getting stuck. And then below the swivel you have the leader, which in this case is approximately a foot of, in this case, 2-pound fluorocarbon, which really makes it hard for the fish to see, which is a good thing. And then we have a number 16 treble hook that we use to actually catch the fish. Now that we've talked about all the tackle we use for fishing, the last thing we're going to talk about is the bait. The first thing we're going to talk about is live bait. There's two common types of live bait that are used for fishing. One is generally either some type of worm, or the other is some type of fish. For example, you don't use a lot of minnows for trout, but trout will eat minnows. But as a general rule, for any type of fishing, big fish eat little fish. So minnows are always a good type of bait. And if you're ocean fishing, you might be using a skipjack tuna this big to catch a marlin. So big fish eat little fish. The other type of live bait is some type of worm. Could be as simple as an earthworm or a night crawler or little wax worms. Mealworms, any type of little worm that fish love. You put a couple, a lot of times I put those on a single hook and just kind of thread them on. Or you could put them on each on the point of a treble hook, especially if they're small like mealworms, something like that. But worms are a very common type of live bait. The types of artificial bait that we're going to be using, and the one we use most commonly here at the regional parks, is called dough bait, and the most common brand name is power bait, is what most people refer to it as. And this is what we use, this is what we give out when we teach the fishing workshops. Basically what you want to do is you want to take a little bit of the dough bait, just enough to make a very small ball, and you take it at something as small, and like as we mentioned, this fish hooks are very small. You want the ball to be small enough so that when you put the fish hook around into the dough bait goes around it and just covers the points of the fish hook. If it's too big, once again, the ball's going to look weird to the fish and they're going to know something's going on and they're not going to bite. The other types of artificial lures that we use are salmon eggs, which are naturally occurring, so the trout will eat those. You put like one on each point of the treble hook. They're great bait. They're not as durable as the power bait, so you have to check your bait a little more often. Other common trout baits, marshmallows or cheese, not as common as they used to be, but still very popular baits, and you never know. The point with these is, notice how small each one of these is. You have a number of them in a tackle box. I have 3 or 4 of these, marshmallows, salmon eggs, and so forth. You just have a bunch of different baits like that, and you just keep trying something until you find something that works. Now that we've learned about the gear and the tackle that we use to go fishing here, the last thing we're going to discuss is a knot that can be used to put your rigs together. And the knot we use and the knot we teach is called the improved clinch knot. And we're going to demonstrate it. This, we're using this line. This is like it's going back to the fishing pole. And then all you do is you take the end of the line, the tag line, go through the eye of the hook, pull it back about 6 to 8 inches, and then I like to just hold, whether it's a big hook or a small hook, I'd like to put my middle finger right above the eye of the hook, and then each time I pinch down on that, the tag line coming back, and then I just wrap it 7 times. And you can spin the hook. I just like to do this because it keeps positive control over the line if the wind's blowing or if your hands are cold. And if you spin the hook, it can put twists in the line, which just generally you don't want to put twists in the line. It makes it hard to cast, ends up getting caught in the reel and so forth. So this is just a nice positive way to keep control. And if you're using real heavy line, like you can get by with as few as 5 twists, but I like 7 because it provides enough friction, and 7's a lucky number. So then after you have your 7 twists, 7 wraps, you take the tag end and go back through the loop where your middle finger is keeping it open. And that makes a new loop. Then you take your tag end and go back through that loop. Then you kind of cinch it down, but you don't want to tighten it yet. Because if you tighten it now, this monofilament line is basically just plastic. And if you tighten it down, it will get hot enough to possibly break the line or at least weaken it. So before you cinch it down, you need to put some lubrication on this. You can use any type of water, lake water, whatever you have. The most common and easily available is spit. So you put a little spit out there, and then you just kind of cinch it down, and it'll make a nice tight knot with the loops kind of overlapping each other, so you can see that it makes a nice secure knot with plenty of friction. And then after you get it cinched down, you just take your fingernails, clippers, clip off the end nice and short so the fish can't see it, and there you have your knot. And that is the end of the Don't Fear the Gear section of the Junior Fishing Workshop. Don't fear the gear.